Well, hello everyone. Once again, this is Kevin LaRue from Skylum Software. I'm located in San Diego, California, and I'm really pleased that you guys could be with us today. I'm going to be joined in just a few minutes by Dan Bailey, and he is a Fujifilm X-Photographer. This webinar is kindly presented and co-sponsored by Fujifilm North America, our friends there. And today Dan's going to be showing us how to create stunning, outdoor and travel photos. He's got a great vision for this stuff. He specializes in shooting mountain sports and active lifestyles and landscape images. Um, he's also the author of a great book on the X series. If you're a Fuji shooter, I highly recommend getting his X Series Unlimited book. It'll give you a lot of great tips on how to use your camera. I've actually learned a lot with my XT2 reading the book. Um, I'm really pleased to be joined by Dan. We've known each other for a long time. I kind of look at him as sort of a Renaissance fellow. From being a musician and a photographer to actually a mountain bike racer and a pilot. This guy's living life large up there in Alaska, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Dan today. So just a couple of housekeeping questions. Dan's going to be walking through some of his images and giving you some insights on how he uses Luminar 4 to achieve his artistic visions with his photos. At the same time, I'm going to be kind of behind the scenes, taking your questions using the question panel on your GoToWebinar control panel there. So if you see the question panel and something comes up, I'll try to answer it myself if it's not necessarily related to what Dan's talking about at the time, but also feed some questions over to Dan periodically, and we'll try to answer as many as we can during the course of the webinar.
Yeah, how's it going, Kevin?
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and change the presenter over to you, and you can take it away with any opening comments and jump right into it. Okay?
Cool. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you guys having me. I'm excited to do this webinar. Thanks to Fujifilm for kind of setting this up with you. I've been a Luminar user since pretty much the day it launched. And let's see, show my screen.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, so you should see this Luminar window. Yep, there we go. So I've been a Luminar user since pretty much the day it launched, the first generation back in the fall of 2016. And I had heard about the program. There was a little bit of promo ramping up to it, and I didn't think much of it simply because I had tons of other things to think about, and one more processing program didn't really catch my interest. My life was already complicated enough. But I decided to try it out on a whim, and I instantly fell in love with it. And I actually met Kevin that day too. I happened to be in San Diego the day that it was launched, and so I tried it out, and I found that I really enjoyed using it, and I've been eagerly following along with all of the updates that have come. And the thing that I really enjoy about it is that it kind of helps me simplify my processing life. I spend way too many hours at my computer. I'm sure everyone does. Our whole lives are wrapped around computers now, and it didn't used to be that way with photography. And so I'm with the Fujifilm system, especially. I'm trying to get away from having so much revolve around computers. I'm shooting a lot of JPEG with my Fujis, and I'm trying to make my processing very simple. I don't want to spend a lot of time. I don't want to spend hours and hours doing that. And I recognize that some people do enjoy diving in deep with digital editing, and that's fine. It's processing is a very integral and traditional part of photography. But for me, I'm intrigued by the notion of capturing the moments right when they're on location and trying to walk away with a finished image or something very close. And so with Luminar, I'm often just using the program as just a way to tweak my images and make them stand out a little bit more, or else take them in a slightly different creative direction. So that was my short blurb. Is that short enough?
No,
Uh,
that's great. I think folks are real super interested in how you're using the software. As I mentioned before we started, Dan, there is one person who wanted to ask about using it in Lightroom, and I have gotten another question about just would you lean on Lightroom to be your catalog and then run Luminar as a plugin, or are you satisfied with the cataloging capabilities of Luminar 4 right now?
I still use Lightroom as my main catalog simply because I'm kind of coming from a legacy position where I've got over 100,000 images in my catalog, and it also has full keywording and full captions and metadata and everything. As you can see here, Luminar does have a catalog. It's at this point it's brand new with Luminar 3. So 4 I think they've mostly concentrated on improving the processing. But as you can see, it's just a hierarchy-based catalog that references folders. So when I click on a folder, it'll take me to whatever. Yeah, I can just kind of dive down through these folders, and you add folders with this button here, add folders with images.
Right.
I also, so what Luminar doesn't have right now is keywording and captions. There's no way to add. They do have stars and color ratings and favorites, but they don't have keywords and captions yet, because every time I ask about this, I'm always told, not at this time. So I would imagine that at some point they'll introduce that. So right now I'm using Lightroom, and I do occasionally use Luminar as a plugin, and it's very easy to set up under Luminar's main menu, which you can't see, it's on my other screen, but just right next to the Apple menu on a Mac, on the Luminar 4 menu, there's a drop down called Install Plugins, and you just hit that, and this is what you get. And so I've already installed. Let's see. So I've already installed Luminar 4 as a plugin, because you can see it's already installed for Lightroom and Photoshop. I could install it for Apple, which if you still had Aperture, although Kevin, does this do Apple Photos as well?
Yes, but you install it in a different way. So
Okay.
you have to use you have to use the extensions capability in Photos and System Preferences.
Yeah, I'm a diehard Apple user, but man, they really complicated people's lives who were dependent on Aperture. That was probably a real bummer. But anyway, as you can see, if you haven't clicked these, it'll stay install. You just click install and hit done, and it'll install Luminar as a plugin. So when you go to Lightroom and you go to edit an image, I think the menu is it for the photo menu, Kevin? Do you know? I can't.
Yeah. So once it's installed in Photos for Mac, when you go into the editing mode,
Or Lightroom, I'm saying.
oh, I'm seeing for Lightroom. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're in Lightroom, it's I think it's the Photos
Or filter.
edit in. Yeah, filter edit in.
Yeah, filter menu, and then edit in Luminar 4.
Yeah.
And then it'll bring up an external window, and you do your edits, and then you'll have the same screen. And then you bring up your edits, and then hit done, and
Right.
it'll bring a copy back,
Right.
an edited copy, because you'll tell it what kind of file you want to edit. Do you want to edit a 16-bit TIFF file, or just do a JPEG?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
The only thing about doing it that way is that you're still running through Lightroom's demosaicing raw converter algorithms. So I know that's been an issue for Fuji users, because Lightroom hasn't always done a great job demosaicing the Fuji raw files. So if you're running it as a plugin, you're not actually, and you're editing raw files, unfortunately it still goes through Lightroom's raw converter first, and then it opens up in Lightroom or in Luminar. So to get the best performance, you'll want to edit the raw file straight from the standalone version of Luminar.
Yeah, I would add that most of our engineers that are working on the software are Fuji shooters, and so they've made it a personal mission to make sure our raw conversions of Fuji RAW files are stellar. So
Yeah, I've been really impressed with them. I've looked at lots of different programs. I'm not as picky about the. I know some people get really up in arms about how bad some raw converters for Fuji are. Lightroom certainly used to be horrible. It's gotten way better over the years. I think Luminar does an amazing job. I think it's people have asked me, well, how good is it? I think it's somewhere between Lightroom and Capture One. Uh, People have said Capture One is. I mean, I've used Capture One. It's fantastic, but it has a really steep learning curve. It's so much more. There's just so much more stuff to deal with Capture One. It's not as easy user interface. So that's what Luminar does. It's got a great user interface. It's easy to use, and it does great conversions.
nice, nice. Well, what are you going to show us this morning, Dan?
Okay, so um, I've got a few images here. So when I scroll through my main catalog, if I look at let's look at Chugach Mountains aerial photos. Let's go to Lucian Range here. There's a fewer photos in there. So when I look at these images, loads of catalog, I can scroll down and I can just choose an image. And by the way, for the record, I'm running Luminar on a 2010 Mac Pro. So this computer is over 9 years old. And it has a lot of RAM in it, so it runs pretty well. It does run snappier on my laptop. And it's like any other software. The newer the computer, the faster it's going to run. So anyway, if I'm going to click this as a favorite, you can do the P, like pick, or you can do star ratings. But I'm just going to add this to my favorites. So I've favorited a bunch of pictures here in my catalog, and I'm just going to go through and demonstrate how I use the program. And I haven't rehearsed any of these edits that I'm going to do. We're just going to kind of walk through and whatever comes to mind at the time. And so I'm going to do a few different images, and we'll explore some of the processing capabilities, and we'll kind of start from easy to more complex. So when I have my favorites, the easiest way to bring up the editor is to hit the D key for develop, just like in Lightroom. You just click on an image and hit D. And so that brings up the main tool panel here, and it also loads the looks down here. So the presets are called looks, and so it does take a little bit of time on my system because it's a little older. But anyway, so when all the looks are loaded, I have my histogram, and I have my tool panel over here. There's Essentials, Creative, Portrait, and Pro. And so we're just going to start with the Essentials. And one of the real benefits of Luminar is that a lot of the tools are AI powered, so artificial intelligence. And what that means is that the developers have created mathematical constructs where they've analyzed, or the computer rather analyzes thousands of images and thousands of possible adjustments to an image. And they've come up with tools that essentially will make a series of complicated adjustments with one or just a few sliders. So for example, the AI enhance filter, which is the second filter here, is usually how I start. And so when you click on a filter, you open up the menu. And as you can see, it's just two filters, accent and sky. And so if I just grab the accent and slide it this way, as you can see, it kind of darkens the sky, it darkens the landscape. It does a real complex variety of adjustments. I could take the sky enhancer. And actually I have a better image. Let's you can see what's going on. Actually, we'll stick with this for a bit because we can explore the looks. If you ever want to back out.
And Dan, you might also want to show the before and after slider because sometimes the GoToWebinar system isn't as responsive as your mouse is.
Okay. When I grab these tools, I tend to just crank them all the way up just to see what they do. And then I'll dial them back to my liking. So we'll just stop here at, say, almost 70%. And then there's two ways to preview before and after. There's the little I button up here, just a click and hold. And there's also the before and after slider that you can drag back and forth. Whoop, zoom. So the before and after slider, you can drag that across the image. I tend to like the eye. I think it's a lot easier to use. Bring up the edit. So there's before and after. The looks are a series of presets that Luminar has installed. And when you click this, you see all the presets I have, all the preset packs I have, or the looks packs. Essentials, I think what comes with the program is essentials, street landscapes, portraits, lifestyle, dramatic, and aerial. And then these are all other ones that I've found. Luminar gave away these tonality presets recently. They may still have them online. I think these are fantastic. They're really stylized black and white looks. In fact, we can just bring one up here. Let's do the tonality vintage. And so when the looks come up, they load, and you just choose one that you like. And then you dial it up or down as needed, or it starts at 100%, and then you can dial it back. And so actually, I really like this. I've got this sort of monochrome look. It's barely monochrome with a slight bit of color. And that's the kind of in-the-moment creativity that I like to experiment with. I don't always know what I want with processing, or rather I might have an idea, but I like being pleasantly surprised by these and inspired by these possible looks. So here's one called Greek Nights. I just pulled it up, dialed it down to 56%. I think that looks really cool. And if you decided that you really like that appearance, you can actually save this adjustment. You can save this as a look. So we're going to call this, we'll call it Dan Muted. And now when I go to back to looks, I see my Luminar user looks. So we'll find a different picture here. To go to the catalog, I just hit G. I'll hit library and then G for grid. We'll go to this picture, and we'll let that load. And there's Dan Muted. If we dial that back a little bit, we get that similar effect where it's just a twinge of color. So that's how the looks work. And there are different, as I said, there are different packs of looks that come installed with the program. And the easiest way to start with is Essentials. And as you can see, the first one with Essentials, oops, let's see. The first one is AI and Image Enhancer, which matches what this does pretty much. So if I choose that, it's going to mimic with the AI accent. And obviously for this image, what I find is if I use the AI all the way at 100%, it's way too much. So I like to dial it down. So that's the easiest way to adjust an image and just kind of pull out the highlights. Let's go to another favorites to show you an even better example. We're going to take this image here. And And as you can see, it's a little dark. Actually, let's make sure we're zeroed out. Yep, original. Here's the raw version. So we'll let that load. And as I said, 9-year-old Mac. I was going to run on my laptop, but I like the bigger screen, the better microphone. So here we go. Everything's loaded. And I can choose the creative palette here. And then just drag the AI accent filter. And you can see that immediately fixes the image. There's a lot going on. There could be some contrast stuff. There could be some brightness. But that does an amazing job. And it's one slider. I could look and see, well, there's some blue sky up here. We could try to enhance the sky a little bit. Maybe it doesn't see any skies in there. Color is always a good one. We can adjust some vibrance. We can also click and click an individual color, increase saturation. We'll stick the blue channel. And so they're richening up my skies a little bit. So yeah, there's 2 adjustments, AI enhance and color. And so 2 sliders, and we spent what, a minute or 2 on that image. So that's a very easy example of a very clear example of how easy Luminar is to use and why I like the simplicity of the program. I don't have to draw layers and masks and create complex selections. It's just very easy to do. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. We'll choose a different photo. And also, if there's any questions, Kevin, feel free to throw some at me.
Yeah, there was one question I thought was useful for this part of the demonstration, and Alan asked how do you import looks into Luminar? So once you're back in the, I don't know if we can see your menu bar there, but if you want to,
yeah. Well, there's one way is to click here, and you can go to Get Luminar Looks. But right. once you've downloaded and installed the looks, you go to the Luminar, let's see. You go to the Luminar file menu, and it has an Add Luminar Looks collection. And so it'll bring up whatever looks you have downloaded. And then you just click on one of those. Like we'll click on this analog style, open it. Oh, it's already been added. So there it is. So there's the analog style that I've added, right, which is right here.
Right, and as Dan pointed out, we have a lot of these on our website and what we call the marketplace. You can easily get to them by just clicking that button that's in the Luminar Looks panel. It says Get More Looks. Super easy to install. And one thing I might note is that there's a lot of different ways to create looks. I mean, Dan showed you just making some adjustments and saving a look. But looks can also include textures. They can also include what are called LUTs or color or lookup tables. So there's a lot of things that you can build into these. I've actually got a friend, a photographer friend, who's an infrared shooter, who has made a bunch of looks that are optimized for enhancing infrared images. So they don't do any good on non-infrared images, but they're really great for her style of photography. So anyway, just a little color commentary on looks
there. Yeah. So now this is a good example here. So we're going to dive in a little bit more deeply with this photo, and as I said, I usually start with the AI enhance, and I'll just drag that up, and you can, on this image, you can see it's doing quite a bit. It's kind of doing some gradient adjustments. It's darkening the sky, lightening the foreground, And so, there's before, there's after. So already that looks much better. But let's take this a little further. The next one that's brand new to Luminar 4 is the AI structure. And this is a really cool tool because it sort of combines sharpening and clarity. If you go to Lightroom and you do a clarity adjustment, it's a global thing. So you're going to increase the sharpness and the edge sharpness of everything in the frame. What the AI structure has done is, I'll just show you, it sharpens the background, but it touches very little of the foreground. So as you can see, it's brightening the foreground a little bit down here, but it's not really sharpening and over crisping this stuff in the foreground. So it's only touching the icebergs back here in the mountains. And so that's really good if you have, in fact, we're going to do this. We're going to go back to this photo here. Let's do this. We're going to go to the JPEG version. It's just faster. So we're going to sharpen this. So notice the textures back here. If we drag the AI sharpness slider or structure slider, it sharpens the background, but it does very little to her face, almost a little bit of brightening, but it doesn't crisp it up. It doesn't over sharpen it at all. Even the stuff in the hat, these really defined lines and her texture here, none of that's touched. And so that can help you that helps you increase separation and isolation between foreground and background. And this can be a very valuable component in photography. It helps your subject stand out from the rest of the image. And it helps the viewer's eye go right to your image or right to your subject. And that helps, it just helps make a more compelling photo. So adding that separation can be a really good thing. So we're going to come back.
Hey, yeah. Dan, while you're on this particular photo, one of the viewers asked me about the boost slider in the AI structure. Kind of, if you could comment on that. Asking, what is it actually doing? I'm not sure I know, but maybe you can experiment a little bit with it.
Yeah, let's find out here. We'll just grab this. So we crank this up pretty much most of the way, just so we can see the visual effect. Boost. Yeah, it just kind of increases contrast. You can see down here in the shadows. So it kind of does exactly what it says it does. It just gives it a boost. It just
I'll tell you what, folks. I'm gonna try and get a more technical explanation on this, and the folks that have asked the question, I'll send an email out to you after the
webinar. We could do an edit mask, which we won't do that on this picture. I'm going to do a mask on another picture. We're going to go back. We're going to come back to this picture, but we're still going to look at this for a bit. So we did our AI enhance, and then we did our AI structure to kind of sharpen the icebergs, brighten up the foreground a little bit more. It just adds some definition, but it doesn't over sharpen and over crisp this stuff here. The next tool that I like to use is the landscape enhancer. And this is where they've combined 3 tools from Luminar 3 and the other previous versions, and they've put them into this one palette here. So now this is where you find dehaze, which can add some color. Lightroom took a long time to add a dehaze slider as well. It's right here in the Luminar landscape enhancer. And you can see clearly what it does. And as I said, when I grab these tools, I just max them out and just see the effect and then dial it back to my liking. Golden hour, just add that little twinge of warmth. And this is a really useful tool because you can use this to actually make things look a little more sunsetty, or you can just eliminate that blue cast in your photo. If you're shooting in the shade, golden hour will help add warmth and reduce the overall blue cast of your photo. So it's not just a special effect, it can actually be a problem solving tool just to make the photo look more appealing. Foliage enhancer will brighten up the greens of foliage. So here we can see that's what it's doing down to these greens on the corner. We can tell it what kind of foliage we have. So if we had a Japanese maple that we wanted to brighten up, we could crank it up to this area in the red. Or if we had fall foliage, I bet if we drag this down to this kind of yellowy orange, oh yeah, so it's finding the green, and then you tell it what hue to look at, or what you want it to look like, which is a little different from how I just described it. As I said, some of these tools I'm working through for the first time. So yeah, you tell it how you want it to look, but really it's pretty simple.
I'm glad you showed. I'm glad you showed that foliage enhancer and picking the hue there. I haven't done that myself, but I will. I will try that in the future.
Yeah. So here we want to make our green look a little less garishly glowing, and make it look a little more yellow. So you can just add a touch of realism, make it stand out less. You know, we want that separation from this, but we don't want it to be, you know, so garishly overdone. And that's kind of the look I go for, or the mindset I have when I'm shooting, is I want to accent my photos and make them appealing, but I don't want to make them overdone, because I think if you go too far with processing and enrich everything in the frame, then you're essentially giving your viewers a bowl of sugary cotton candy and maple syrup, and they have nothing complex to digest. And you know, you want your viewers to come in and look at your photo and look around and explore and get their own ideas and try to interpret the ideas that you put across. You don't just want to give them a bowl of candy, because they're going to look at it, see everything, and go, okay, there's everything, I'm done, next photo. So that's often why I don't like HDR stuff, because I think it's giving away too much. So let's go to black and white conversion. This is, if you don't have those tonality film packs, this is an easy way to shoot black and white and apply these, or create or shift to black and white. So here you're adding, what am I doing here? So I'm adding some, I guess as if I were adding a little bit of toning. So I'm adjusting the brightness on the red channel, adjusting the brightness as if I were using black and white filters. And I'm not quite sure why this red toning is coming up. See that, Kevin?
I'm looking at that right now. Yeah.
And maybe that has something to do with not sure what's going on there. We can try that with another picture.
Yeah. We'll
if you ever want to back out, if you can turn the filter off that way, you can always revert to 0 that way.
Wow.
And then again, you can always go back to here, to the little history button, and then just go back to original.
Right, right. Hey, one thing I did want to clarify, Dan, you've mentioned the word tonality a couple of times, just for everybody's benefit. Tonality was a specialized black and white software app we did about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And, you know, most of the black and white functionality has been built into Luminar already, but many people dug the presets that we had in that software. So one of our education guys sort of replicated all of the tonality filters from the previous software and put them into these looks. And so that's what Dan's referring to when he says tonality.
Oh yeah, so I just backed out on all my other adjustments and went straight to black and white. And now you can see I don't have any of that toning anymore. But I can still adjust my, adjust the tones as if I were using color filters on black and white film. So we'll back out of that. And as I said, I always like to look down here. This one comes to mind. This look here. Just whatever catches your eye. You're creating looks and moods that appeal to you. And so whatever ways that you want to accent those, here's where we started from, and here's that. So I just find it it's funny. I'm talking about not falling down the rabbit hole of processing, but there's literally an endless amount of adjustments you can make to an image, which again is why I like using Luminar, because the sliders are very concise. They each do something very specific, and the looks are very concise as well. You can see what they do. You don't have to just slide and slide and slide and, well, what's this do? What am I going to look like? You can quickly achieve results that you either like or don't. And if you don't like them, you back out and, or dial the filter down, or just go back to the beginning. So,
hey Dan.
Yeah.
Malcolm asked, since we're on the black and white topic, Malcolm asked if there was a way to desaturate everything except a single color or single object in there, and I think those yellow flowers might prove to be a good way to answer the question.
Let's see. There probably is. Let me. Maybe you can help me figure this out.
So yeah, once you've converted it to black and white by desaturating, I think you just bring back a particular color.
Oh yeah, so maybe we could do it a color. All right, let's go back to here. So original color, take all the saturation out. So there's, oh yeah, so I just chose yellow, and I'm not sure on my screen I have just the names here. On my laptop I have the actual color icons. Anyway, I chose yellow, bumped the saturation all the way up, and then started moving this back. And so the rest of the image is still fairly monochrome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. I'll work on in the background as well here. Just a quick time check. We've got about another 15 minutes, Dan.
Okay. So let's dig in a little bit more. We're going to go to, let's go to this one again. And we'll go back to original. I'm going to do a few different adjustments on this one. We'll start with enhance, like I usually do. So we're back to 0. So you can see cranking that up, a little bit too far that way. So I'll just dial it back a little bit. We could just do the sky. If I do it too much, we have a halo around our head, so we don't want to keep that in check. Structure, this, as we saw, this is a good one for AI structure because we can sharpen the background without touching her. Details enhancer is an interesting one. This can be pretty useful. It breaks details up into 3 different categories: small, medium, and large. And so when I do small details, you can see it really accentuated the textures on her face, which might look really cool if she was a craggy old man. She's she's a very jovial, craggy Scottish woman. So we can either make her very craggy, or you can drag it the other way. And that's actually a really good thing to point out right here is you can go backwards on the AI structure, which I'll often do to, here's a good image to show you that just real quickly. So if I were to, I'll just do a quick, let's hide the looks. You see those? If I want to crank the accent up, brighten the whole image, and then go to structure, I could back off on the structure, and that softens the background a little bit instead of cranking it all up. Because if I have a busy background, that competes with her too much. So I can soften the background, make her stand out a little bit more. Then I can use Details Enhancer to sharpen the small details on her. So now I just pulled out the sharpness of all these mud spatters and textures on her skin and her bike. And so here's before, there's after. Medium details, you can see it starts to get more of the bigger details back here, and same with the large. So small details can be a good way to bring out very fine textures that can help accentuate an image by increasing the sharpness of the small details. While we're on this picture, let's go down to the Pro filter, Dodge and Burn. Start painting. We click that. And we bring up the brush, and we can, using the brackets keys on your keyboard, increase the size of the brush. And then we just brush, do a little bit of brightening. And as you can see, you can kind of dial it back a little bit. We're done painting. And now we can adjust the amount of brightness we want. So there's beginning and there's end, and we've spent less than 5 minutes on this picture. We'll go back to her again.
Hey Dan,
Yeah.
While you're sorting that out, there's a few people who are going to ask if you could show them how to use mask and layers.
Oh yeah.
If you have and another person was asking about your best technique for sharpening something, and then number 3 was a question about sky replacement. If you want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I will talk about sky replacement because I think it's kind of cool. Let's do a mask here. I was playing around with this image the other day when I was on the phone with Kevin. And so make sure that's back to original. So let's do a quick enhance. Maybe a quick vibrance. And now I want to darken this area here. So, and actually this is less of a mask than a gradient. So adjustable gradient. I can set my orientation. And then do something like that. So there's before. So there's before, there's after. Let's do, I'm gonna do sky replacement first, and I'm gonna think about what kind of a mask I can do. I don't often do masks. So if the person asks that question, just type in a type of mask that you might be interested in seeing. Because I do so few masks that it's kind of, it's eluding me right at the moment. Anyway, under here, under the creative, we have this new AI sky replacement. And this is pretty cool. And this is a feature that I sort of poo-pooed when I first saw it. I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm really excited about the AI structure, the enhance, sky replacement. That's just not really something I do a lot in my pictures. That said, I'm a pro photographer, and I've had a lot of pictures sold where clients have replaced my skies, and that it's not always done very well. The sky replacement Luminar is pretty fantastic. And so whether you're shooting professionally or you just want to increase the look of your picture, maybe you have a great subject, you took a really cool trip, shot a great photo of a neat subject, but the sky was horrible. All you have to do is click the sky replacement menu and hit sky selection is the first thing. And you have this whole set of skies that you can choose from. You can also load your own sky. So if you had a file of your own sky images, you can load those. But we're going to start with, say, a different blue sky. And it just takes a little bit to load that. And there it is. Now, the first thing I notice is that she's sharp, the background's blurry, because I used, I think I shot with a 35mm lens up close. And so she's sharp, the background's blurry, so therefore the sky should not be blurry. That just looks wrong. So under advanced settings, I have sky defocus, and all I do is grab this and drag it up, and suddenly I can match the look of the background, the rest of the background, with one slider. And to me, that's pretty amazing, to replace the sky and change the focus just like that. We could choose a different sky. We could do dramatic sunset. I actually like that one. I used that one previously. And as I chose a new sky, but it still has the same defocus element selected. There's a tiny bit of a gap down here. I can close the gaps.
Hey Dan, while you're thinking about that, there has been a question about how to minimize the haloing around her head. It looks like there's a little bit of kind of a lighter edge there.
Yeah.
Are there any techniques other than kind of dialing back the
I think we dial back the sky enhancer. Let's see, close. I wonder if, let's see. I wonder if a mask would help.
It could. That might be a little more involved than than we have time for. But yeah, you could certainly play around with that a little more. I've always found better better results by just dialing back one of the.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Just dialing stuff back is usually the best. Results. So there's one more aspect to the sky replacement I want to talk about, and that's the relight scene. So here we have this, and as you can see, Luminar does a really good job matching the ambient light of the subject to what it's done with the sky. And you can increase that effect by relighting your scene. And so it adds a little bit of warmth, it darkens her up a little bit. So yeah, you adjust the horizon. So that kind of closed, just changes the look. Let's see, landscape contrast. I wonder if that would help. Oh yeah, so you can adjust the foreground contrast without messing with the sky, and also the exposure. So it's pretty fun to experiment with. It's very simple to use. Let's see.
So
here's another one.
So probably time.
Another question.
Probably time for one more image there, Dan.
Okay. Are there any more quick questions?
There was just the question about sharpening the photo, but I think you've done it a few times. But if you find a way to sharpen this a little bit, that might be a great way to introduce the topic.
Yeah. So for this, start with sky enhance. Just brighten the whole thing up a little bit. I want to get rid of my green cast, so I'll go to light, and we'll just a little bit towards the magenta side to minimize the heavy green cast of the photo. Maybe increase a little bit of vibrance, a little more excitement. And then the details enhancer is often where I like to do the sharpening, because here I've just done small details and I've already brought out an incredible amount of crispness in the main subject between small and medium details. And maybe, yeah, structure on the negative side, soften the background a little bit. And then we'll crank up the small details again. If we wanted to, let's see, we talked about the adjustable gradient. We saw that last time. The portrait enhancer, I don't have any great examples and I haven't played around with this much. If you are a portrait shooter, which I guess you told me that most of the people in here were landscape shooters. So if you are a portrait shooter, there are a number of amazing portrait tools. Again, these are all like one slider adjustments that would normally probably take a lot of masking or outsourcing for retouching. Kevin mentioned the loot styles, the lookup tables, just tons of different possible looks. Ooh, that's cool. Dial it down a little bit. So just adding slightly different looks to your picture. And then the dramatic, the sun rays, that's a fun one. We can add a sun ray. We can maybe pretend some sun rays are coming in here. So we need to find, oh yeah, so we find this little guy. And we find an area where the sun could plausibly be coming into the scene. And there's some scenes you might even have the sun in the scene. For this one, we're going to do right here. And then we'll just kind of dial it back. So we'll go back to color. A little more vibrance. And there's our before picture. So there's before, and there's after. And it's a little too much sun, so we'll just dial it back. Just give it a tiny bit of excitement in there. So there's before, and there's after. So some of the some of the adjustments I've made today have been fixing problems. You know, the image is too dark or the foreground's too dark. Just simply grab a slider, grab the AI slider, and just crank the whole thing up. That's a raw. That's gonna take a lot of load. So yeah, fixing problems. Just grabbing some of these sliders and deciding that you want to just make the image look a little nicer. Just solving problems, making it more workable. One slider option, and then maybe reduce a little bit of light. And then with some images, I've gone a more creative route. We did a number of creative things with this glacier here. With the people, the woman photo, we added the sky replacement. We experimented with some loot files. We had a really interesting preset here where we took away most of the color and just kind of this sort of enigmatic monochrome look. So that's how I use the program. My goal is to come up with an interesting look that appeals to me in a very short amount of time. So whether I'm solving problems that need to be lightened or fixed or sharpened, I've got a number of tools to do that with the AI Enhance, the structure, the golden hour. And then if I want to get more creative, I've got the looks palette, and I've got all these other creative tools like sky replacement, sun rays, dramatic. That just adds a lot of kind of boldness to the picture. I've got matte look, takes it in the other direction. Matte look would be good for portraits or just kind of muted scenes.
Yeah,
so yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there that
can fade there on the matte look. The fade I've found really does a good job with that. Start to fade that out.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, look at
that. Hey Dan, this has been pretty fascinating, and it is great to take a trip down memory lane through some of your images, and I really appreciate what you've shared with us today. Guys, I have about 25 or 30 questions that involve a little bit longer answers. Just so you know, I will get to these within the next half hour or so after the webinar ends. I've also put a link in the chat window to a free trial version of Luminar. So if you don't have Luminar, you can very easily download a trial for either Mac or Windows. There will be an email going out a little bit later. I will have a recording of this webinar in that email, so you'll be able to review any of Dan's tips here. Dan, any last minute parting thoughts?
I guess the best thing I can think of that would apply to what we've been covering, there's so many tutorials out there about processing. There's so many experts that tell you what to do and what you should do. In the end, it's your own eyes. It's what you like. If you come up with a look, if you shoot a landscape and you come up with some interesting look that is wildly different than what you shot or what you thought it was going to be like, and you like it, if it appeals to you, then run with it. Trust your own eyes, trust your own desires and feelings about what appeals to you, because they're your photos. And with all of these tools, you can really make your photos look like whatever you want. And there's no rules that say they have to be any given way. And the one thing about photography, the last thing I'll say is, photography as an art form is a representational medium. A picture is designed to evoke ideas. It's not supposed to just perfectly reproduce everything that was in the scene exactly the way you think you saw it. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap And I've heard people say those exact words, is I'm trying to reproduce everything I shoot this way so I can reproduce everything I saw. Perfect reproduction isn't exactly art. Accuracy isn't exactly art. So tweaking things a little bit or a lot can make a big difference in your own creative style.
Yeah, great insight there. Once again, folks, thanks for joining us. We're going to close out this Skylum webinar, again presented by Fujifilm North America. Dan's one of their X-photographers, so he does a lot of testing on the new gear, and certainly shooting and talking about Fuji around the country and around the world. I will, as I said, have a recording here shortly. It'll be emailed to you automatically to the email address that you registered with, and I will get to all the questions that we have in the queue here that we didn't have time to get to. I will give it my best shot. Thanks so much again, and have a great rest of your day wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in.